Hey guys, what's up? Scotch Duck here, once again. Right, remember those like rocks videos that I used to do, where I would like just talk about some random series that I liked and just go through all the games in front of the camera and gush a wee bit? Well, I've not done one in a while. It's been quite a while since I've found a series that I've kind of wanted to do that for. But I've got such a series here right now. So, we're gonna talk about Shining Force. Now, this video is most likely called Shining Force Rocks, but if I'm feeling particularly bitter and fancy some clickbait, I might call it something like, why Shining Force is better than Fire Emblem, because that's something I want to get into, okay? Because Shining Force, for those of you that don't know, is a strategy RPG series by Sega, okay? And Sega was all about just like taking on the competition back in the 80s and 90s, apparently, you know, like Final Fight was doing good, so they made Streets of Rage. Mario was doing good, obviously they made Sonic, and Fire Emblem in Japan was doing good, so they made Shining Force. It really is that simple. I could sit here and justify about how it's like different, but it's not. They wanted to make a Fire Emblem game, they just made a fucking Fire Emblem game. So, what is it about this that makes me like it more than Fire Emblem? Well, first of all, I'm going to go through each game in the series, well, at least every one that I own, anyway. So, your first one here is the original Shining Force, and again, there's not much to it. This was like, it's just a grid-based strategy RPG. If you've played any Fire Emblem game, you'll know exactly how this plays. It's got its own sort of like spin on it. It's a very Tolkien-esque world, you know, they've got centaurs, they've got like, I think there's elves and shit. They've got birdmen, I can't even remember what they're actually called, but yeah, it's very much high on the fantasy and the like strategy RPG gameplay, blah blah blah. You've got an overworld to explore. And honestly, the sequel is pretty much the same thing, although, in my opinion, a lot better. This is the best Shining Force game I've played thus far, okay? This was actually the one that I always used to hear of. Every time you'd hear about Shining Force, or like the best Mega Drive games ever, this one would always come up. And yeah, again, it's much better. Very similar to the first, but just like executed so much more better, I'd say. So, if you're gonna, and you don't really need, there is technically a continuity, but I'd say it'd be alright just to jump to this one. That's just me though. Okay, and the last one in the sort of trilogy, the main series trilogy here, is Shining Force 3, and there's a lot to talk about with this one. You know, those ones on the Mega Drive, it's just like, oh, you played Fire Emblem, you played those. In terms of gameplay, this is very different. And this was actually the game that inspired me to come out here and do this, because I hate to say it, but I think this has become a cursed game, okay? I grinded out Shining Force 1, 2, then went right on to this one, and I've kind of burnt myself out. I do that a lot with like these big RPG franchises. It's really good though, right? I got about halfway through the game, and I'm not saying I've given up just yet, but even based on what I've played, I'd probably put this in like my top 10 Saturn games anyway, because it's executed just as well. It's just on the Sega Saturn instead of the Mega Drive. Now, the most interesting thing about this game though, for those of you that don't know, it was actually, in Japan, split up into 3 different scenarios, each on its own disc that Sega would release like every few months, and how it worked was that the 3 scenarios would be concurrent with each other, and they would all come together to unlock a true final boss that you would get. It's actually not entirely dissimilar to Fire Emblem Fates and what Nintendo did with that. You know, you had your 3, although they had the 3 separate timelines, this was like just 3 separate main characters going through the same adventure, and you would have different battles. And it was annoying playing this actually, because this is the only version that we got. The other 2 scenarios have been fan translated, but you would get things like characters doing shit in battles, and like there was optional like objectives surrounding them, and I'd look up online, it's like, oh, if I save this guy, what happens? You'll be able to recruit him in scenario 2, which again never came out, so it was like, well, that's kind of shite. So for that reason I kind of didn't want to like jump into it. but I'm really glad I did. It's definitely the most story heavy of the bunch too. You notice I'm talking a lot more about this one. It's because it kind of gives me some more to deal with. So yeah, I might have stopped it, I've gotten into other games, but it's definitely a really good selection for the series, for sure. Now, in terms of main series, the only other one I've got, and definitely the one that most people remember fondly, is this Shining Force CD. That's another thing about this series, you know, I collected all of these games throughout the years and never really sat down to properly play them until, like, just the other month there. I missed out. I really missed out, you know, because that's always, you all know me. That's my stupid mentality. It's like, oh, that's an RPG series. I've got one. I gotta get them all. It's like fucking Pokemon, you know. Anyway, there's this one right here is a re-release of 2 of the Game Gear games that were only released in Japan. We got them in English with this. Now, I'm definitely more hesitant to play this one than I was Shining Force 3 because turns out, what you actually need, you need like a Sega CD memory card. Mega CD, sorry, I'm not American. It's one that plugs into the Mega Drive's cartridge slot and basically acts as like a memory card for the Mega CD. And I can't think of... It's crazy to think that there's enough games on that console that would warrant like a memory card expansion pack. But the thing about this is that I said earlier that this was made up of 2 Game Gear games. Well, you beat both of those games, you unlock a third scenario, if you will, and apparently if you do some other set of objectives, you'll unlock a 4th scenario. But you can't actually access these without save data from the first 2 scenarios, and the Mega CD's internal memory is not big enough to hold everything. You literally cannot play this game in its entirety without a Mega CD memory card. And they're pretty pricey, okay? So I've not got round to getting through this one and picking that one up yet. That's quite lame of you, Sega. Damn your 90s self, I suppose, but knowing me, I'll do it eventually. So yeah, that's Shining Force CD. And those, I guess, are like the golden gems of the franchise. The only other one that I have right here is Shining Force EXA, and I say this about a lot of games, right? But the reason I picked this up was because the characters on the cover were featured in Project Cross Zone. You know, that game that had like all of these like Japanese famous characters. You know, my curiosity burns. Like, I want to get the whatever games these guys are in. I want to get them. So that was what led me to buy this one. It's an American copy. Didn't come out over here. Who the fuck knows when I'll get to it. I hear that it's not really even a strategy RPG. I really don't know, but it's there anyway. And just for completionist's sake, I also have Shining in the Darkness and Shining in the Holy Ark. These are dungeon crawler games, but technically they're part of what's known as like the Shining series, you know? Shining Force is just like the main most beloved version of it, I guess you could say, but there's actually tons of them, most of which now only come out in Japan and don't look that good, if I'm quite honest, but I want to get around to these ones too eventually. I don't know when, but, you know, I've got them there. So that's everything I've got there, and yeah, Shining Force has really, it was a really nice surprise, honestly. I didn't think I'd get into it as much as I did, to be honest, because, again, I can't help but draw comparisons to Fire Emblem with this, because I kind of, like, thought myself a fairly big Fire Emblem fan. Because most people who know me in real life know this, and I've probably talked about it on this channel before. If someone knows me in real life and is watching this video, they're rolling their eyes right now because I'm talking about this again. But I used to be really bad at strategy RPGs. I couldn't play them. They would like... And this wasn't a matter of like, oh, I wish I was into it. I actively tried to get into them, you know, and I just couldn't. And it was frustrating because I would see games like Fire Emblem, Shining Force, and Valkyria Chronicles, all these games, and think, I want to like them, but I can't. It's like, it was such a weird feeling. I eventually got out of that like rut with the help of like Fire Emblem Awakening and but mostly Valkyria Chronicles. They were the two main ones that finally shone the light of strategy RPGs onto me, if that's what you want to call it. But I always like Fire Emblem is obviously the most prominent example of that franchise. And since I sort of considered myself now a fan of the genre, I thought I must be a big fan of Fire Emblem. And I've played quite a few of the games over the years, but when I got around to Shining Force, it does some things different from Fire Emblem. And I prefer them so much that it's got to the point that I don't know if I could like play a sort of old school Fire Emblem game. I'm probably being like really harsh here. Obviously I could and I would enjoy it, but there's things that the Shining Force series does that Fire Emblem doesn't. It's gonna bother me. It's gonna bother me. So I've just got like a little list of things that I'll point out here, and if it sounds like it would tickle your fancy, by all means go for it. The first thing that it does, and this is the really big one, there's no permadeath. Now, newer Fire Emblem games have strayed away from this. They give you the option to turn permadeath off, and I get it. Honestly guys, I do get it. If you take out permadeath from Fire Emblem, in a sense, it's not really Fire Emblem anymore, eh? I get that it's a thing that really defines the series and a lot of fans really dig it. But it wastes your time, okay? Like, I know we've all done it. We've all been in that scenario. If any of you have played Fire Emblem where you're going for a map, one of your guys dies, it's like, oh, turn off the console, day it all over again, okay? You're not gonna like continue the game with one of your guys dead. That's fucking stupid. You gotta get through it with everybody alive, you know? But when they die, it's just like, oh, I've got it. That's like 30 minutes of my life I'm never gonna get back. And yeah, again, they've turned off permadeath, or given you the option to do it, sorry, as the years have went on, but Shining Force did it immediately, you know? It's like, if one of your guys dies, you can spend a little bit of money, and boom, they're back. It really just takes away a lot of like tension and anxiety almost. That honestly was one of the things that stopped me from getting into the genre in the first place. You know, it's just so nice to see it gone, quite frankly. So that I really, really appreciate, okay? Another thing that it does, the second thing if you will, is that it's actually got towns and an overworld. Again, Fire Emblem kind of went down this path eventually, sort of. But in Shining Force you do legit have towns with loads of people and shops to explore, and you can explore an admittingly fairly empty overworld, which just serves as like a means of getting from location to location. There's nothing like groundbreaking to like find or whatever. But it does add a layer to the game that I can appreciate, so I can dig it. I can dig that quite a bit. And the third thing I want to talk about, I can't remember at the moment, so I'm probably going to put a jump cut here till I remember it. Okay, I remembered the third thing, and it's a bit stupid. It's a very like personal like thing that I like, and that's the fact that you can grind in this game. Your main character has a spell that at any point in any battle, he can cast it, and it will take you back to your last save point, and all of the XP and all of the items that you gained in that battle will remain. So you can effectively do a battle any number of times as long as you don't complete it, and just like grind on it. And that, like, I know some people don't dig the grinding or maybe think that's stupid, but it adds like a level of like, what's the word? Satisfaction and reassurance that like I'll be ready for whatever the game like throws at me, knowing that I have the option to do some grinding. Again, you don't really get to do that in Fire Emblem. And again, it's sort of like came in like recent iterations of Fire Emblem. Do you see a pattern here? Okay, just saying. And the fourth thing is probably the most stupid of all. Well, at least I thought that at first, but the more I looked into it, the more I realized, no, this is fucking important. I really want to call attention to the fact that Shining Force has this over Fire Emblem. And that was the fact that in the 90s, when this series first started, Sega actually bothered to fucking release them. Think about that for a minute. We didn't get Fire Emblem until the 7th game in the series, okay? Nintendo was like, oh, people don't like this style of game. But Sega was like, oh, we made this game, and we're gonna fucking give it to people, you know? Fellow Europeans will know exactly what I'm talking about. You know, if you had a Super Nintendo in Europe in the 90s, you didn't get any RPGs at all. America did, obviously. but they didn't get, like, you know, your Fire Emblems and stuff. Well, if you were on the Sega, you got to play them. Now, ironically, the tails have totally turned. Now it's Nintendo who's, like, very happy to localize and give us loads of Fire Emblem, and Sega doesn't localize Shining Force at all now. Which is sort of good and bad considering what the new games look like, but it's still worth pointing out, I feel, you know, so I can dig that. I respect that, you know, like, that Sega stood by their strategy RPG enough and gave us it, regardless of what country we came from. So, a lot of you probably won't agree, but that's just how I feel, you know. But again, I highly recommend, if you're a fan of Fire Emblem, give these a go, you know. There's a lot to them that you might end up liking, just like I ended up liking. So, that's that, guys. Hopefully I'll go back to I was about to say Dragon Quest. Hopefully I'll go back to Shining Force 3 before it becomes a cursed game, so that's that. See you after, thanks for watching. Bye-bye.